welcome to The Explainer. We're all going to find ourselves in a hospital at some point. So what is it that truly makes that experience a good one or, a really terrible one? The answer might not be what you think.
All right, let's get right into it. When you think of a great hospital, what comes to mind? Probably shiny new buildings, the latest, most advanced medical tech, right? But is that what actually sticks with you after you leave? We're about to dig into a fascinating study that gets to the real heart of the matter.
Really think about it. If you or someone you love had to go to the hospital, what's the #1 thing you'd care about? We all know that feeling, that little knot of anxiety when you walk through those doors. And what happens in the hours and days that follow, well, it makes all the difference.
So, is it the cutting-edge stuff? The fancy MRI machines and the robotic surgical arms? Or is it something way more basic, more human? Like the attitude of the people, the doctors and nurses you're interacting with. That's the mystery we're going to try and solve today.
Okay, so this is where it gets really clever. A couple of researchers over in India decided to play digital detective. They wanted to crack this case by going to the one place where people share their most brutally honest opinions, the internet.
To do this, they used a really cool method called netnography. So forget about those stiff formal surveys with checkboxes. Instead, they just dove straight into the messy, authentic world of online patient reviews. They were basically listening in on thousands of real conversations to uncover the ground truth. And they weren't just grabbing any random comment. They carefully sifted through tons of reviews for 12 major hospitals in Mumbai. And out of all that online chatter, they focused on just 51 really rich, really detailed personal stories. They knew that a single in-depth story tells you more than 100 simple 5-star ratings. It's in the stories where you find what really matters.
Now, to make sense of all those stories, they used this super rigorous 3-step process. First, they went through and tagged all the key ideas, things like rude nurse or caring doctor. Then, they started grouping those ideas into bigger categories. And finally, they boiled it all down to find the core themes that really define what a patient goes through.
So after all that digital detective work, what did they actually hear in these raw emotional stories? What truths started to bubble up from all that data? Well, they've found stories of just deep frustration. You can feel it in this person's words. They feel totally ignored, abandoned, even questioning how these doctors are employed. And notice, this feeling of being devalued, it has absolutely nothing to do with how nice the hospital building was.
But then they found the exact opposite. Stories filled with incredible gratitude. A doctor isn't just called brilliant, but an amazing soul. Here, it was the human connection, that feeling of tender, loving care that actually made the patient feel like they were getting better.
So after going through all these powerful stories, a very clear pattern started to emerge. It turns out the patient experience doesn't come down to 100 different things. Nope. It was actually 5 key human factors that popped up over and over again. And here they are. These are the big 5. The personal qualities that consistently determined if a patient had a good or a bad experience. Its attitude, empathy, ethics, capability, and emotion.
Let's break down a couple of these. So, attitude here, it isn't just about smiling or being polite. The researchers defined it as the values the staff showed. Were they committed, responsible, or, on the flip side, were they just rude, negligent, and dismissive?
And empathy, well, that's a step beyond attitude. It's that ability to really get what the patient is going through. It's showing real compassion that's about more than just doing the medical procedure correctly. It's that feeling of being seen as a person and not just another chart. Okay, so here's the crucial part. All 5 of these human factors are important, for sure, but the data let the researchers rank them. It let them see which one was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the patient experience.
So, before I show you, what's your guess? Which one do you think came up the most in these stories? Was it capability? The doctor's pure skill? Or maybe ethics? Making sure everything was fair and above board? Which one would you bet on?
And wow, the results aren't even close. Just look at this chart. You can see one of these factors was talked about way more than any other. Empathy and ethics are up there, but one of them just completely blows the others out of the water.
That's right. Attitude. Just attitude.
The way the staff behaved, how committed they seemed, their sense of responsibility, that was the single biggest thing that shaped how patients felt. In fact, people talked about attitude more than they talked about the doctor's actual skills and the hospital's ethics combined.
So what's the big lesson here? What's the takeaway? Why does this single finding, that attitude beats pretty much everything else, matter so much to all of us?
Well, it brings us to the core finding of the whole study. You can have the fanciest, most high-tech hospital in the world, but in the researchers' own words, it is the attitude which actually plays a significant role. At the end of the day, it's the human touch that makes or breaks the whole thing.
So here it is, the final ranking. It tells the complete story. The things that create real value for a patient are personal. They're human. Attitude and empathy are the clear 1-2 punch. The data just proves what we all kind of feel in our gut, right? How we're treated as a person is what we remember, way more than the technology that was used to treat us.
And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. If a positive, responsible attitude is the secret ingredient to great patient care, are we doing enough to foster it? How can our hospitals and our medical schools get better at training for it, measuring it, and rewarding it? That's something for all of us to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.